Now fast forward. For 10, 15 years, 1917 to 1930, the Soviet Union, this new society, the only socialist society on the earth at that time, recovers from World War I, and to the surprise of everybody, starting with Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin, and all the rest, to the surprise of all of them, they survived. Remember, they had lost World War I, then there was a revolution, then there was a foreign invasion. Again, I love to remind my American audiences. In 1918, 4 nations invaded the Soviet Union to destroy the new Soviet revolutionary government: Britain, France, Japan, and the United States. 10,000 American troops landed in Russia to overthrow their government. No Russian troops ever landed in the United States to overthrow anything. But Americans have been worried blue that it might happen and can't understand why the Russians could even imagine such a thing. History, unfortunately, doesn't work that way. So they were a destroyed society. They had a civil war on top of it. They came back quickly at enormous sacrifice to the Soviet working class to rebuild that society after World War I. And they had done it by the end of the 1920s at enormous sacrifice. But the problem was the government, and this is the most important thing that we'll have time for today, the government of the Soviet Union had replaced all the private industrial corporations. The private industrialists had mostly left Russia, became exiles, went to places like Paris, London, New York. Or they became workers like everybody else. But they lost their position. The private corporate leaders, gone. The shareholders, gone. One of the first things the Russian Revolution did, close the stock market. There's no need for a stock market to buy and sell, because that stock certificate you have, tear it into strips and save on toilet tissue, because that's what it's worth. Gone. And the government came in and took over. The government appointed people to run the factories. In the aftermath of the revolution, the workers still went to work Monday to Friday. They did the same tasks they did before. But instead of doing it for a board of directors selected by the big shareholders, private capitalism, they did it for the government. What the government had done is seize the economy. But they hadn't transformed the economy, and they never did. Stalin declares in 1930-31, this is socialism. Lenin, dead by that time, would have, and probably did, turn over in his grave. No, he would have said, what we have, Lenin's phrase, is state capitalism. The state has become the capitalist. And that's important, and that's good that we did that. That's what the revolution accomplished, and that was great. But now the task was to transform, and you, Stalin, you didn't transform, you just declared that, here we go now, when the state is in charge, we got socialism. Wow. From being the means to the transition, seizing the state became the transition. From the means, it became the end. The end of the, we have socialism because the government has taken over. Even though the relationships between the government running the industry and the mass of people is not that different from the relationship of the private individuals who used to occupy those positions in relationship to the mass of the working people. But for the next, For the next century, till here we are. We have a mass of people, most Americans, who think that socialism has something to do with the government being in charge. No, that's not the idea. The idea was to get the government, because with that power, you could then make the transition. It wouldn't be the transition, it would be the step that would allow you to make the transition. And what would the transition be? Let's go back. To reorganize enterprises, factories, offices, stores, so that they would work in the interest of the whole community, because the whole community would be making the decisions. Not a small subset, the owners of the shares, the boards of directors, tiny minorities. No, 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 no. That's over. The question was, did the state transform the economy? And the answer is no, they didn't. Not because they're bad and not because they're stupid or nothing like that. This is the way the history worked out. It's an understandable thing. Poor Stalin. Well, he had to go to the Russian people who had sacrificed unspeakable in their lives. And what was he going to say to them? Thank you very much. You've sacrificed unbelievably now for the last 15 years. It's 1930, since the revolution. I'm glad to announce to you all what we have achieved is state capitalism. We got a whole nother sacrifice for God knows how many years to get to. They would have ridden him out of the town on a rail. He couldn't. So he did what politicians do. He substituted the wish for the reality. We've made it. We're here. Socialism is when the government does stuff. And it's more socialism the more stuff it does. And if it does a real lot of stuff, it's communism.